experience was so much more like a near-death experience, even though I wasn't near death. And so she brings forth a lot of the research that's available now to show how that works.
Yeah.
Again, all of that was just really getting started. You know, Dr. Raymond Moody wrote his book, Life After Life, in 1975. And it wasn't too many years after that that things started getting rolling in relation to research about this. Well, now, there's so much information and so many people out there who are experiencing these things and coming forth with it.
Yeah. And, people are doing this near-death experience without experiencing death through ayahuasca, meditation. I don't know, you can do it in so many ways. I was a kirtan.
You got to accentuate the positive. Wow, I feel good. A little bit of feel good goes a long way.
You're listening to Karen Swain, teacher of deliberate creation, accentuating the positive, showing you a way to a better life.
Accentuating the positive, it's not just fad, it's sanity. Who in their right mind would accentuate anything else?
If you feel like that's what you want to do.
Hello and welcome to another show, Accentuating the Positive with Karen Swain. So great to be with you. Again, I have another beautiful woman to introduce you to who has an extraordinary experience. Her name is Paula Lenz. Welcome to the show, Paula.
Thank you so much, Karen. I appreciate being on your show.
Oh, and thank you for calling me Karen. Most Americans have such a problem with the pronunciation of my name, but anyway, you've done well. So remember, if you like the shows and you're learning from our conversations on ATP, remember to like and subscribe and leave your comments in the comments if you're listening to the YouTube, or send me an email if there's no comments under the audio platforms. Now, Paula had an extraordinary experience. We're going to go into Paula's story. There's so much to talk about. And we're also going to talk to Paula's brother. Let me tell you what happened. I'm just going to read the bio here. A direct encounter with spirit and infinity. A complete change in consciousness. In 1983, Paula Lenz had a recurring dream which proved to be precognitive. It was of the sudden death of her brother Don that year, which would come close to completely destroying Paula at the time. She did not know, however, that this death would result in a strange occurrences and an outreach from him for the rest of her life. 3 days after Don's funeral, Paula had an out-of-body experience with her brother's spirit while she was driving the car, which I find really interesting. The result was a visit to infinity and changed her consciousness and the understanding of oneness. Paula has put her experience in her book, which is now out, called Driving into Infinity, Living with My Brother's Spirit. Paula holds a Bachelor's Arts degree from Sam Houston State University. Her career for almost 40 years includes high school English teaching, partnering and co-founder of a women's own business, national manager for worldwide engineering firm, and executive director for the North Houston Association, a major association in Houston, Texas. So you've had a busy life. You've had a really busy life. And you've had a very mainstream life, very corporate business, not talking about spirits talking to you too much in your business world.
Well, yes, that's exactly right. This year marks 36 years since my brother transitioned from his earthly life. And really, as you say, this part of my life has only been known since I published the book, which came out in September of 2017. And before that time, there were only 2 or 3 of my very closest friends who ever knew anything about what all happened to me for all these years. And so it was quite an experience to finally get the story out for everyone to become familiar with what had been going on with me all these years. And it really has helped me to experience for the first time in my life feeling like a truly authentic person, and the ability to claim this other side of my life that I've never talked about. So, 36 years ago is at the time when my brother, as I said, transitioned. And I'm the oldest child in the family. I was 4 years older than my brother. I'm 10 years older than my sister. So my brother and I essentially lived our childhood together, since there's so much more time between my sister and I. So you talked about the precognitive dream that I had, and that dream actually began in the fall of 1982. And this dream was the same every time. I mean, this recurred for the next year. And that dream was, I was outside on some hills, and there were some people gathering there. And as time went on, more and more people gathered. And someone finally came up to me and asked me, hey, what's going on here? And I looked at the person and I said, I don't know, but I've heard that it's the end of the world. And when I said that, I looked up in the sky there with all this crowd of people, and there was Jesus in the sky. But when that happened, I just doubled over almost down to the ground in this terrible agony. But it wasn't physical agony. It was like this heartfelt suffering and just agony beyond words. And as I bent over like that in this agony, I said to myself, but it isn't supposed to be this way. I thought the end of the world was supposed to be joyous. And then the dream would end. And this, as I said, was a recurring dream for the next year. So, I would ask that everyone fast forward with me here to the year 1983 in the fall. And at that time, the day was Friday, October the 7th in 1983. And that particular morning, I was driving my husband to a meeting. I was going to drop him off because I was going on downtown in Houston to what's called the Greek Festival, to the Greek Orthodox Church there. And they have a huge outdoor area there. And so part of this festival is outside, part of it is in the annex area where they have food. But as I'm driving him, my husband, to this meeting, I suddenly began to experience this terrible pain over my heart area. And I glanced at the clock in the car to check and see if I was getting my husband to his meeting on time. And it said 9 a.m. And I was, as I said, experiencing this terrible pain over my heart area. I was 30 years old at the time. And I thought, do I have a blood clot? Am I having a heart attack? I was very frightened. I just didn't know what was happening. I'd never had anything feel like that. But I didn't say anything to my husband. And after about 15 minutes, the pain began to leave. So I dropped him off. I went on down to the festival. And later, sure enough, my husband showed up at the festival. Well, by this time, there were these huge crowds of people there because this is a very popular festival in Houston. But I could see him making his way through the crowds to me. And as he got closer to me, I saw his face. And I knew that something was horribly wrong. I mean, I had never seen him look like that before. And as he finally made his way to me, he put his hands on my arms, and he looked at me directly in my eyes, and he said, Donnie was killed in an accident this morning. And his face just crumpled. And I just, in my mind's eye, all I could see was like a picture or an image of the earth. And it was just falling, 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 and crashing at my feet, just crashing. And at that moment, then I just doubled over in pain, like toward the ground, just crying and screaming in the middle of all these people. And then I knew what the dream had been trying to tell me. It was showing me the setting I was going to be in and my reaction. But of course, I never had any idea of who or anything, what that was totally about. And of course, at that time too, I was just completely destroyed by the loss of my brother.
I just want to interject here, because interestingly enough, in your dream, the end of the world, you had this knowing that it's not supposed to be like this, it should be joyous. And I've heard you tell your story before, and you do go into how the pain and the tragedy and the grief. And one of the things that I want to do on this show is to show humanity that the transition of anyone that we know from this world to another does not have to be painful. And that's something that came up in your dream. It's not supposed to be like this. It should be joyous, right? And that's like, death should be joyous. To me, death should be joyous. It's not for many. It's painful. And you experience that pain, but it's interesting in your dream that you knew that. It's not supposed to be like this. It should be joyous. Yeah.
And that's a very good observation about that. Because transitioning to the other side and experiencing, what I did with my brother, which I'm of course going to talk about here, but yes, it's freeing and it's joyous.
Yeah.
But of course, at that moment, I didn't realize that. But yes, that is an excellent observation there, how that came through in my dream.
So let's go to the part where you're in the car, because obviously you're in a lot of pain and upset. And was it just before or after his funeral? What was happening?
This was 3 days after his funeral, so
Right.
It was five days after his transition.
Right.
And essentially, I had stayed in my hometown, which was about 90 miles from Houston, to help my parents and, do some things that week. So that day, I decided to take some of the funeral flowers to my grandparents' house. And the only vehicle I had there in town that I had access to was my brother's personal truck, because he was actually killed in a company truck. And so I took his truck and I was by myself. And it's about 10 to 15 minutes to my grandparents' house. And as I'm driving along, all of a sudden, I just developed 360-degree vision while I'm driving. And you can imagine, I had no idea what was happening to me. And as soon as that began happening, then I saw at my right shoulder, right behind my right shoulder, I saw my brother. And he was like a pattern of lights, but you could still see him, who he was.
Yeah.
And he was talking to me telepathically. And he was saying, I don't want you to be sad. I want you to be happy because I'm happy. And most of all, he wanted me to know what life was like for him now. And when he said that, then I suddenly left my body and I went with him And at first, it was almost as though we're looking at a negative of a photo or something. You know, it was just kind of a black and white landscape. But then we kind of got beyond that, and it was like my consciousness with him. It was like I was out in the middle of the universe, and I just felt that I was just existing, you know, in a state of pure consciousness, really.
Beautiful.
And at that point, and my brother stayed with me through this entire experience, right by where my shoulder was. But the first thing that I felt was this wave of peace come over me. And the thought came to my mind, the Bible verse, the peace that passeth understanding. And then the next wave that came over me was this wave of all knowledge, that I knew everything in the universe, about the universe, everything that had ever happened in the universe. I knew this knowledge. And then finally, the third wave that came over me was this energy of pure love. And I knew, and in my book, you know, I call it spirit, because to me, it's this energy of just pure love, of creation and manifestation of everything that is. It's really the all that is. And at that point, I became one with all of that. It wasn't that I just knew it, you know, thinking wise. It's that I was all of these things. I was peace. I was all knowledge. I was this love, this energy of love. And I knew that everything, everyone, everywhere, that we are all one. There is no separation of any of it. And that's what I was. And it was joyous and beautiful. And, you know, I knew, of course, as I said, that I was out of my body. And I, at that moment, experiencing all of that, and again, my brother was still with me, I knew I didn't want to go back to my body. I knew I was out of my body. I didn't care one thing about going back to my life at all. I wanted to go on because it was beautiful and just fabulous. This energy, this love, this knowing everything. And yet I knew that I wasn't actually, I'll say, in heaven or whatever. I knew that there was more. There was more to go on to, that I was just at the beginning area. And so I decided I wanted to go on, that I didn't want to return. And when I began thinking that, I began to whoosh away. That's what I felt. I felt I was whooshing away very rapidly. And as soon as that began to happen, I didn't get very far because my brother somehow, I mean, I feel like he exerted his energy on me, and he began pushing me down, and he said to me at that time, "No, you can't go yet. It's not your time." And at that point, he just pushed me back down, and I saw myself coming into my body, and I just sort of landed there with a thud. Now, let me say too that somewhere in between experiencing this energy of love and wanting to whoosh away, there was a period where it was as though my brother were telling me some things. But, and I vaguely remember that part, but I have never been able to remember what it was specifically that he told me.
Well, we'll ask him today.
versus everything else I could remember perfectly, even now.
Yeah.
So yes, I do feel like there were some things either I wasn't supposed to know, or it was about my future, or whatever.
Well, as I say, we'll ask him today. All right. Okay. So this is an amazing experience because it's really like a near-death experience, except that you didn't have to have the car accident to have it. Like your body was still driving the car. I mean, probably you were out for a nanosecond. Like it probably felt like ages in this other place, but when you came back in your body, there was probably no time lapse. Was there any time lapse? Like who was driving the car when you were out of your body?
There had to be a little bit of time lapse there, at least of a couple of minutes, and I'll tell you why. Because the road that I was on,
Right.
There was a turn that I had to make further down the road in order to be on the road to take me to my grandparents. And when I came back into my body, I had already made the turn. I was already traveling the road to my grandparents' house. And, to this day, I have no recollection of course, driving the truck.
Isn't it amazing that some part of you, or maybe your angel, or some part of you, because I believe our angel is a part of us, was driving the car? Well, another part of you, the part that you remember, was flying around infinity with your brother. It's fabulous, isn't it?
Yes. Well, and when I got to my grandparents, I was totally in a different state of being, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
But of course, I was not inclined to talk to them. But the interesting thing is, for the rest of that day, I was just peaceful. I was happy. I'd been with my brother. I knew he was okay.
Mm.
And when I got to my grandparents' house, of course, they were deep in grief about my brother. And the strange and interesting thing about that was, it was as though I were viewing them and their grief from my brother's viewpoint.
Perspective.
I could see how terribly sad they were, and the grief that they had, and yet I couldn't really identify with that at the moment. I could just see how my brother was seeing us being so devastated. And that's how I went the rest of the day.
Yeah. Okay, so what did that feel like? It's like, as I'm feeling into it, it's like a complete detachment. It's like watching a movie and not having emotion about it, just watching it. Like you're not, let me help, like you're not emotionally engaged. It's sort of like you're just witnessing. Is that how it felt?
That is exactly, you're picking up on exactly the way I felt.
Right.
I was witnessing their grief, and I was not feeling any of that.
Mm-hmm.
What I was still, actually, I almost felt like I was glowing. And I just think it was from the experience of being one in a powerful, complete way with the energy of love of the universe. That's where I was. And the peace. And you're exactly right. You hit right on it on all ways that I felt detached. And I tried to comfort them. I said, well, I know that Donnie is alive, and I know that he's okay. Now, I didn't divulge anything to them about what I just experienced. And but I did share at least that with them. But the funny thing was, it was as though I never said those words to them. And that is exactly how, again, I could see how my brother was viewing us, that there was just no reaching us in this depth of grief that we were experiencing. And it was really
so it's a bit of feedback. This is so important. This is exactly what, This is exactly what spirit does. So in our grief, we have no access to that communication, because that communication comes from that place of bliss, like you've just described. And even when the physical human being stands before you and tries to comfort you, like you said you were trying to do with your grandparents, there's no getting inside that bubble, of grief. It's like you lock yourself out from any, I don't know, words of comfort, or you're just sort of isolated inside your pain. Yeah.
It's true. That's what I could see about them. And it was a different space that I was in totally. It's as though I were still with my brother and his viewpoint, even though I had come back into my body. But, from the moment I returned to my body, my consciousness and everything I realized about life, or had not even realized about life, all of that became different. It just, my consciousness about how things are or how I viewed them, just intuitively, I knew to be different.
So how long did that last, Paula? So in that space of complete bliss and viewing, like you said, you viewed your grandparents and viewing life through the eyes of source. This is what Esther talks about. This is what teachers talk about, as I talk about, to see life through that, from the lens of your higher perspective, like to not get so caught up in the negative emotion. How long did that last? Did it last the rest of your life, or did it last just a day or two? Or
I wish that I could say that it had lasted throughout the rest of my life, but really I was only able to stay in that kind of mindset for just the rest of that day.
Right.
The next day, I fell back into this grief that I had, because I realized that for the rest of my life on earth, I was not going to have this funny, wonderful, loving interaction with my brother ever again. And that is what, started me back into the grieving process. Even though I remembered everything from the day before, and I knew that I was different. But the love that, between my brother and sister and I, it was just.
My guides are saying, stubborn humans. We give you this exponentially expansive experience and you still go back into your stressful thoughts. That's what this is.
Yes, but right. I don't really be.
We all do it. I mean, I'm not pointing you out, but
I know, and it's really a case of dealing with love, the love as humans that we have, versus the kind of love we experience when we are on the other side.
Yeah.
And that's what I got to experience, that different side of love that is so complete, and versus the love we have here. You realize, and certainly it was a wake-up call to me, you realize how fleeting truly life can be with people you love. And that's what, when you come back into that, that's what I think is difficult to mesh the two. It took me a really long time to fully integrate into my life a lot of the aspects from that experience. But again, that being said, I did realize that my consciousness as a whole and a lot of the things that I understood about life were completely different than either I'd been taught in church or whatever. It just became different.
So what did you do with you went back into the grief. How did it change your life? How did knowing we're all one, what did you do differently after that experience? Like, how did you live differently?
Well, I looked at all of humanity differently. I could see how, the only word I can think of at the moment is how ridiculous we are in terms of splitting off, splintering off into all these various groups around the world, and the fighting. And, I would think back on how many wars have been fought in the name of religion and God. Mm-hmm. And I just think, what are we doing? There were just things like that all the time. And the other part was, now I was raised Baptist, in the Baptist religion. And, but I could not return to, what I term as religion. Mm-hmm. I was in a state of spirituality. And that's what I sought from some place to go and be part of, that would help me open or be more in tune with that spirituality on more of a regular basis. And eventually in Houston, I found the Unity Church, because they believe that, all of humanity is on the road back to spirit. And there's not prejudice there against other religions, mm-hmm. like there are when you're in a religion. Everybody else is wrong and you're supposed to be right. Mm-hmm. It was just a totally different view in terms of who we should be and what we should be focusing on while we're here. Mm-hmm. The spiritual aspects of ourselves. And being a part of that at Unity and participating in a lot of different workshops and things that they had just really helped me grow in that regard, in spirituality, to pick up where I left off, I guess, when I came back, and to want to explore more that all-encompassing feeling that I had for everything. So that was a major deal for me to go down that road.
Let me ask you, did you ever experience or come close to experience that feeling again while embodied, like without having to leave your body?
Well, I'll have to think about that a moment. There are moments that I've had where I'm able to let go of so much of the things that are of this world. And as I've gotten older, it's really, it's all about the heart chakra area to me, the love. That is the connecting thing. And, love does everything for us. And that is what spirit is. And that's what makes us all one. Yeah. So that has just grown and grown through the years, that feeling, that need, and that, wanting to be connected at that level with all that is through love. And it doesn't mean it's always easy, especially when you're working and you're busy and your mind, but nevertheless, it continues to be the driving force for me in my life. And wanting to help people.
And wanting to help people, yeah. It says here that you've had reoccurring communication with your brother, like he's shown up, not just in that one experience. What else happened?
Well, I will say that I did actually see my brother once at my house back in Houston, and he looked just exactly as he had been, in life here. He was actually looking in our living room. He was looking in our stereo area there. But I had come out of the bedroom and I saw him just for an instant out of the corner of my eye. But to this day, it's very clear it was him standing there looking at it. So that was one thing. That's probably the only time I've actually seen him again. But the rest of the time, there are many things that he did, especially in that house. This was when we still lived in Houston, because he had stayed with my husband and I for one summer when he was still at college and he was working there in Houston. But for example, I would come home from work, and in our dining room, which we didn't use very often, I would always find this one chair pulled out a couple of times a week. And this was the chair he sat in at night. Sometimes my husband and he would be in there in the dining room playing this crazy electric football game. And so that was the chair he always sat in. And so after a couple of weeks of finding this chair pulled out, I asked my husband, I said, "Are you coming in here and doing something, leaving this chair?" He goes, "No, I don't even know what you're talking about." But that was just one of many things. I came home one day and a chair that was used in our master bedroom under a desk there. I walked in and headed for the master bedroom, and in the doorway for entering the master bedroom, that chair had been placed right in the middle of the doorway.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, what is happening here? And I actually thought someone was in the house.
Yeah.
But eventually I figured it probably was him. But another time I came home and there was a book that was lying in the hallway. And there was a built-in bookcase there. And you could see where this book had come from. And it came from the bottommost shelf of that bookcase, which was at carpet level. And so you could tell the book had to have flown across the hallway because it was still lying against the far wall. And when I picked up this book, it was an old volume from an old encyclopedia set my husband still had. And it was the volume D. And my brother's name was Don.
Yeah.
And another time, my husband and I were sitting in our TV room, which was kind of a small room. And again, we had some bookcases in there. The uppermost bookcase shelf had videos, home movies, and different things. And as we were sitting there watching TV, all of a sudden from the top shelf, this video came flying out halfway across the room and landed right at our feet. And my husband and I looked at each other like, what just happened here?
But let me ask you, when all that phenomena was happening, he's a cheeky little thing, isn't he? Cheeky little man. He's clever in the way that he can move density, because it ain't easy to do that from spirit.
And that chair, I mean,
yeah.
But
yeah. Not that there's any weight, but yeah, it ain't easy to do that, you know. That's why spirits don't do that all the time. It's like it takes some skill to do that.
Right. Well, and probably the thing that has happened the most of all, and dealt with this picture of him. The very last photograph that was ever taken of him was with his best friend and his best friend's sister, and they gave to the whole family a copy of this photo, and it was in a little cardboard kind of a frame, which I just kept it in that for a long time. And I would come home any number of times and that photo would be turned down. And he's used photos to communicate with me like that all these years. And he still does it. And so sometimes I have to figure out what he's trying to tell me.
Well,
what's happening.
Okay, well, we're going to ask him. But, sorry, there's that feedback again. Okay. Did you ever ask him at the time, like, what are you trying to tell me? I'm listening. No.
Well, I have asked him. I've even asked him to just speak to me in words.
Yeah.
Because he did do that when, he was speaking to me telepathically.
Yeah.
But I've never really heard him speak in words to me. And
well, he's trying to get your attention by, moving physical objects. Yeah. He's just saying, he's just like letting you know that he's here, that he's always with you, and that he always will be with you, and that he's guiding you. When we had a chat the other day, we were talking about how, because you've had a really successful career life, and that a lot of the decisions and a lot of the things that happened were okay, don't say probably. Cheeky thing, he's a cheeky thing. Happened because of his guidance. And oftentimes we get these amazing inspirations and we just say, oh my God, I'm so clever. I don't know how I know that, but I'm just so clever. And we don't really attribute it to our higher self inspiring us, or our guides inspiring us, or our dead relatives. There's just such a huge team that surrounds us all the time that's inspiring us from spirit. And I don't think we give them credit half the time, do we? So I'm sure that he had a lot to do with your successful career.
Well, I did share in my book about the very last business position I held before I retired in 2016. I was wanting to leave the engineering industry, which I had been involved in marketing and public relations for many years, but I didn't know what else to get into. And so I was looking around thinking, where can I send my resume? I really don't want to stay with this company I'm with. And in my head, the one time I really have heard a sentence, and as I mentioned before, I kind of attributed that to my guides, but what came into my mind was, send your resume to, this man's name was Paul, and he was actually president of one of the former engineering companies that I had worked for. And I thought to myself, now, why am I hearing this? Why would I want to send my resume to another engineering company, especially one I've already worked for? I don't want to do that. So I just kind of blew that whole thing off. Well, some more time went by, and I heard at least 2 more times the same words, very clearly in my head. So I just thought, well, okay, I'm going to do this because it's not going to hurt anything. So I did that. But in the end, this man was on the board of directors for this association. And when he got my resume, he called me and he said, well, we're looking for an executive director for the association. He was on the board. And he said, I think you'd be perfect for this job. I want you to send your resume in. He said, get all the information about it. So long story short, I did that and I was selected for the job. And my background for it was perfect because this association dealt with issues that related to transportation, development, and environmental issues, which I'd had background in all of that for all these years. And that position was really the highest and best of my entire career. And I loved it. And it allowed me to use my creativity. My board of directors, let me decide on a lot of these things. And I expanded a lot of the things that had been done and came up with new ideas. And I worked hard at that, but it was just so fun for me. I was using my creativity. It was like I was so in tune with this job and just, I don't know, I just felt like I was spinning little worlds there that just brought me great joy. And I knew that I was really helping the community in the area. And just from listening and going ahead and following through on what I was told. And that's a huge lesson for people too.
It must have given you a lot of self-confidence having that job. Like you must have grown in your self-confidence and self-worth about yourself.
Yes, I did. And as I said, with it being the really highest and best of my entire career, it was a great way to feel like I had achieved, after many years being in business, that I was able to achieve what I considered the pinnacle of the work that I was doing and meant to do, and bring to that my creativity and and intuitiveness too.
Yeah.
I had a lot of intuition about many things.
Right. Yeah, you would have. So you didn't talk about your experience with anyone in your working life, or maybe even in your family life until now. What do you think that you could have? Like, I really feel like we need to come out of our closets with these conversations. And so many people like you are holding down positions, and they're scared that if they talk about this stuff, they're going to lose their credibility or lose their status, or you lose their standing or lose their jobs. And yeah, Spirit says, doesn't matter. None of that really means anything. All that really matters is how you feel about yourself, and that you feel like you're living an authentic life, no matter what you're doing, no matter what job or how much money you're being paid, or who agrees with you or doesn't agree with you. Would you suggest that people do come out of the spiritual closet before they retire?
Yes, and I would comment too that at the time that I had my experience, again, remembering this was 1982, 1983, and at the time there was no such thing as the internet. People didn't have cell phones. And most offices did not have computers. This was a long time ago in reference to where we are now.
Yeah, but I'm talking about now. Do you think that people so we're talking to people that might be in the position that you've been in, and they've had an experience, and maybe they feel like right now that they can't talk about it because people won't understand.
Right. Well, we've come a long way in that whole field of research and people writing books and establishing associations and groups. Nowadays, yes, there's really no reason for anyone to be afraid to speak about their spiritual experiences, because whatever experience you had, I feel certain there's a group out there on the internet that can help you, or that you would feel free to work with or talk with or meet with those people. And that just wasn't the way it was back then. The International Association for Near-Death Studies had only just been formed like in 1980, I believe.
Yeah.
This happened to me in 1983. And one of the after effects I had was that I just felt compelled to read books on spirituality and all kinds of things related to that.
Cool.
And so when I finally got around to writing my book, the last chapter of my book is written by a researcher who used to be an IANDS past president, Dr. Janice Holden. And in speaking with her about what I had experienced and some of the things I'd had happen all these years, she told me that I had a really unusual experience. Number one, because she'd never heard of anybody having an out-of-body experience while they were driving, but also because of all these after effects, a few of which, we've mentioned. But, I have had any number of after effects. And so she wanted to write the last chapter of my book, it's the afterword, to explain how she felt my experience was so much more like a near-death experience, even though I wasn't near death. And so she brings forth a lot of the research that's available now to show how that works.
Yeah.
Again, all of that was just really getting started. Dr. Raymond Moody wrote his book, Life After Life, in 1975. And it wasn't too many years after that things started getting rolling in relation to research about this. Well, now, there's so much information and so many people out there who are experiencing these things and coming forth with it.
Yeah. And, people are doing this near-death experience without experiencing death through ayahuasca, meditation. I don't know, you can do it in so many ways. I was at Kirtan the other night, music, sound healing, and I had a similar experience to you, I was sitting there cross-legged on the floor, And every time I sit cross-legged, my right leg goes numb. So I just brought in my higher self into my body, like this golden orbs, golden light energy. I just brought it and I sat it in my pelvis and then expanded it out. And I just was like out there in bliss, just like in absolute bliss, just ecstatic bliss. And the music was playing and I'm in my body, I'm out of my body simultaneously. My legs stopped going numb. You know, I could sit cross-legged on the floor and my legs didn't go into that numbness or, you know, pins and needles and stuff, like everything, all the pain stopped. And yeah, so there's so many ways we can do it. Okay, let's go talk to Donnie, shall we?
Okay.
Let's do it. You up for it? And now, just remember, it's just you and me. Nobody else is watching. It's just you and me. So you don't have to be nervous. I'm going to get it wrong. I hope I do it right. Like, let's just expel all those thoughts of nervousness. And I'm just going to lead you through a process and we'll see if we can connect with him and we'll see what he has to say. You up for that?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So just relax in the chair. Sit back if you can. We can still hear you. And just close your eyes and take, always I start with people, we start connecting to the breath, because the breath is spirit and form at the same time. So when we're connecting to the breath, we're connecting to spirit and we're connecting to our physical form. And just take some deep breaths in and breathing into your heart. And what I ask people to do is just to ground you, so that you can be here and there simultaneously. Bring your focus and attention down to your feet and imagine that you're traveling down into the earth. And you're traveling down into the core of the earth, and imagine like there's this fire in the core of the earth. And just like when you're standing next to a fire, you feel the glow of the light of the fire, but you also feel the heat. And imagining that heat coming up through your feet, up into your legs, up into your pelvis, up into your body, shoulders, arms, neck. Feel that light and heat moving up out of the top of your head, up into the universe. So I'm going to do this quickly because our thoughts and our imagination works really quickly. We don't have to think about this too much. Moving up 100 feet, 200 feet, as far as you can go, you hit that light, the light of the universe, the light of God, if you like. And imagine that you're standing in that light. Then bringing that light, just like you brought the heat and the light of the earth into your body, coming back in through the top of your head, and feel that light emanating inside your own heart. And then just expand that out, like there's a sun growing inside you. And bring your focus up to your third eye and remember a time when I remember an image of Don when he was smiling, when he was happy. Have you got an image in your mind?
Yes.
Just describe to me what he looks like.
He's very tall. He was like about 6'3". He has a really beautiful smile. His countenance was always happy. Just a great guy.
Where is he standing? Like, look around him. Where is he standing? What's around him?
Where is he standing? This reminds me of what I see is when we were on one of the paddle wheel steamboats in New Orleans. We were out on the deck.
Nice.
That's where I see him.
And is he really happy? Is he smiling and beaming at you?
Yes, yes.
Well, let's start communicating with him. Like, say hello. How are you, Donnie? It's a silly question because he looks fine, right?
Yes.
What does he say?
He said, doing great.
And let's ask him some questions about that time when you were out with him in infinity. Ask him about, you told me a lot of things that I can't remember. Ask him what it was that was important to you that you can now remember.
Yes, I would like to know. I mean, it didn't last a long time. what he was telling me, whatever it was. But
just ask
yeah,
him, like ask that memory of him, see that memory in your third eye and ask him. And he's going to communicate with you so quickly that before you can even finish asking him, you'll get an image, you'll get the information that you're asking for. What I'm
seeing and what he's saying is the book, writing the book. But yeah, well, I probably would never have believed that, that I would write a book. In fact, I didn't even know when I retired. I started writing the book like 4 months after I retired, but even at that time, I had absolutely no idea about writing a book. So.
Okay, well, let's ask him why you didn't remember until now.
Why didn't I remember until now?
Yeah. What's he saying?
I think because he's saying you would not have believed me. And that's probably true. I would have been like, oh, no way. Because back then I wasn't the person that I am now.
Is there anything else that you want to ask him?
Does he see my dad? Our dad, rather.
What does he say? As soon as you ask that, what did he say? What's the feeling?
He said yes, and I could actually see an image of my dad, like when he was much younger, from photos I had seen. So that's good.
Keep asking him questions. Keep asking him. Stay focused. You know, this is how easy it is to communicate with our dead loved ones. People think that it's hard, and it's not. We have to be in a joyous vibration. We have to remember their essence, remember them through our image, and ask them questions and listen.
Well, he's telling me that I'm doing a great job and that I need to remember that.
Okay, cool.
Because I can be
critical,
rather a perfectionist, and so. Well, that was very interesting.
You don't want to ask him anything else? That was a quick conversation.
Well, I can't really think of anything else.
You'll probably think of a million things after we hang up, but
probably only why he doesn't just go ahead and speak to me.
Well, let's ask him. Bring back that image. Have you still got him there?
Oh yeah, I see him.
Cool. Why doesn't he just speak to you?
Why doesn't he just speak to
What's he saying?
He says he just wants to be funny.
Absolutely, that's what he said to me before.
Because he said that before?
Oh, yeah. When you were talking before about him pranking you with the chairs, I said, why did you put that chair in her doorway? And he just said, just to prank her, just to freak her out. And I just said, there was no significant meaning to it. And he said, no.
So that was the right answer. He said, just to be funny. Well, okay. But see, that doesn't surprise me because that was his personality. But he was funny in a nice way. He wasn't an ugly kind of pranker person. Oh.
He also said that he does speak to you and that you dismiss it as imagination a lot of the time. A lot of the time.
Well, maybe that's my intuitive notions that I get. There is something that, I want to bring up, and that was the incident 3 months after he died at my dad's house when my husband and I went there, and we didn't know it at the time, but we were all getting sick one night when we stayed up there. It was at Christmas time. And I crawled out to the front door and stayed with the door open all night because we had all gotten sick. And the next day when my dad got up, I told him over and over again, there's something wrong with this house. There's something wrong with this house. And then my dad had gone and opened up the closet door where the furnace was, and the door had come off of the furnace. And we were all suffering from carbon monoxide poisoning.
Right.
And I wonder if that wasn't Donnie, because
Feedback. Okay, let's not wonder. Just go back into your mind's eye and ask him. Just go there and ask him.
He said, I did. He said, I did.
See how easy it is to talk to him? You don't even have to close your eyes. Like, I don't close my eyes and do that process when I talk to spirit. I just listen. I just ask a question. Was that you? And just like I'm listening to you, I ask you a question and I wait for I wait for the response. See, what we do as humans is we don't understand that we have that open communication. And so many people are crying out to God or Jesus or their dead mothers or relatives or brothers and sort of saying, are you okay? Are you happy? Are you with me? And they don't actually wait to listen because they don't believe that they can hear. Like, they don't believe it's either possible or they don't believe that they can. They've got this idea that being psychic is you have to be someone different or something different, and we all have it. We just have to let go of the idea that we don't. And once we do, it's just so easy.
Yes, well, there's so many layers that can build up on you and your consciousness and your belief systems too, that can all get in the way of that. I mean, you're exactly right. And
which is interesting because that's what you experienced when you were seeing your grandparents through that perspective of Don's, through the eyes of Source, I like to say. So you were seeing your grandparents through your own higher self too, like that part of you that is eternally in spirit, that's witnessing its aspect of, that like we're an aspect of our higher self having this physical life experience, and we're being witnessed by this higher self who's viewing us from that very same perspective that you had. I think that's just such a beautiful perspective to be able to witness something from that perspective, because there's still love, but there's absolute detachment from getting swept up in that negative emotion, and then seeing how that negative emotion blocks you from any love, I suppose, or guidance or comfort or
anything that you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And that is a really good point, to go back to that point of remembering how I felt at that time, at moments when I'm frustrated with myself or feeling that I'm not living up to all of my potential, or that I'm not treating one of my family members as I should, or whatever issues other people have, to try to be in that kind of completely separate space where you're
loving detachment.
Yes, the detached viewpoint.
Yeah.
Where you care about somebody, but you're not, you're just detached. You're not into all the emotional stuff.
I often think about this, Paula, when I think of Source or spirits or guides watching this planet and watching what humanity goes through en masse, the tragedy, the tsunamis, the wars and the suffering and the killing, and how they watch it like we watch a television show of the same thing. We watch that same stuff happen on our TV. People get murdered and killed and wars. And yes, we do get emotionally involved, but there's still that detachment. It's not personal. It's not my life, and I can watch it and not get upset about it. So, so many people said, why doesn't God care about all the tragedy? But we're doing it all to ourselves, right? And when we die, we just reemerge back to this bliss anyway, and we kind of go, dolt. Oh, what a mess I made of my life.
Yes, it's easy to get bogged down here in so many aspects of this life, versus practicing a little more of the detachment and being in more of where spirit is, with the love, but without you experiencing the agony, the whatever, the agony and the ecstasy, I guess, really. Those are good things to remember for sure.
Well, now you know you can speak to Donnie or Don. Did you call him Donnie?
I called him Donnie all his life, but when he got grown, he really wanted everyone to call him Don.
Okay.
And I tried to, but for me, he was never Don. He was Donnie. So I just continued finally to call him Donnie. And in the book even, I call him Donnie, but his name is Don.
Oh, he doesn't mind about being called Donnie now, he said, because he's just saying that Donnie's fine. Because I started calling him Donnie straight away, and I'm like, why am I calling you Donnie? It doesn't say Donnie here, it says Don. Anyway, now you know that you can talk to him. Let me know what else you say.
Okay.
You've got that open communication.
There is something kind of wild that happened yesterday in my office, my personal office here.
Okay.
I was sitting at my computer and I was reading on your website, your story, your life story.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd been, at your website for a little while. And all of a sudden, I jumped like a foot out of my chair because of this huge noise over to the right of me. And that was where my bookcase is in my office. And what happened was, again, he does things through pictures. There on one of the bookcase shelves, there's a framed picture, and there's 4 pictures in there. Donnie, and then my sister and I, another of Donnie when we were in New Orleans, and then one of me holding my cat. And then there in front of that framed one, which was just sitting up at the back of the bookcase, in front of that was a smaller framed picture of Donnie and my sister Gloria and I. We were horsing around on the couch. It's a really funny picture. Well, the reason I jumped was because this bigger frame picture fell down on its back and knocked the front picture that was framed completely off onto the carpet. I mean, it made this huge racket. So I got up from the computer and I walked over there and I said, I know you're here, Donnie. Now, what are you trying to tell me? Because I looked at the pictures.
Mm-hmm.
I looked at the pictures and I said, what do these 2 framed pictures have in common? And that is that it was all 3 of us kids were in my sister and I and him. And that's all it was in these pictures. So I thought, is he trying to tell me something about my family, something coming up about my mother? I called my sister and I actually asked her, I said, are you okay? Is everything okay? I had this wild thing happen in my office. I mean, most of the time when those pictures are moved, I'm not around.
Yeah.
And the only thing I've ever seen actually happen in addition to that was when the video flew out of the bookcase.
Well, it's so interesting because when you ask those questions, you're trying to work it out from your linear, logical mind perspective. And what I want to say to you, and I want to say this to all of you, because we all do this, right? And I do it all the time, is that stop trying to figure out what it is and just go directly and ask him. Like, let's ask him. Let's go back to him. Just bring up his image and don't shut your eyes. Just bring up his image in your mind's eye. And just ask him, what were you trying to tell me at that time?
But he's not telling me anything.
Well, he is. Okay, so maybe you need to go through that process again until you get used to it. Like, just shut your eyes and like just establish that connection again. Because he's telling me a lot, and I'll tell you in a minute.
I don't know, all I can, maybe I'm just thinking too much in my mind.
I think you're thinking too much, yeah. So
I'm trying to connect the picture of just the family stuff.
You see, you're in your linear mind thinking, why, like when you're in the why, what's the correlation? It's sort of like, it's like you're a sleuth, like trying to put the pieces together. And that's that linear mind. And the linear mind is not where we hear that communication. Where we hear that communication is in the emptiness. It's in that when you listen to somebody, people that don't listen are thinking, and listeners just are fascinated. They just listen without opinion. So it's in that emptiness that the communication happens, not in the thinking, the why, like what's the connection, what's the, trying to piece it together, because it's rarely what we think. It's something completely different. If we do piece it together, I would say that at the time you were thinking something when reading that website, I always say to people, what were you thinking at the time that the incident happened? Like, what were you going over in your mind, like as you're reading something? Because as we read stuff, like you were reading stuff on a website, you're probably thinking, when we listen to other people's story, we think of our own story, right? And you're probably thinking about something at the time, and the sound takes your attention away from that, and then you get all caught up with like what happened, and you kind of move away from where you were in your head. But spirit hears our every thought.
Yes.
So if you were to sort of use your linear mind, think about what you were thinking at the time. So the communication that he's giving me is, he's saying that in the photographs, everyone's really happy and messing around, and there's like huge joy in the photographs. And he's talking about the joy, the messing around, the being carefree, the not trying to, fit in and dance to the beat of somebody else's drum. Just that pure freedom and pure joy, and like naughtiness and just that ecstatic joy. Like as kids do, like you feel like maybe you'll get in trouble because you're making too much noise, but you're sort of messing around, but just that freedom to be. And he also says that he wants to write a lot more through you. And he asks you to evoke that energy of joy and carefreeness more, because when you do, he can access you better. And he's going to be communicating, because he's got a lot to say. He's got a lot to say. And he would like to say it through you.
All right.
So more books to come.
Oh, wow.
You ain't retiring anytime soon, Paula.
Oh, my.
If you let it. So he's saying that there's no coincidence that you and I are having this conversation, because I'm getting you ready for that just by having, this conversation.
Oh, wow.
Connected.
Well,
yeah, he says that, after you had that experience together, you were ready for it then. In that, your energy shifted, your consciousness shifted, you opened, because that's what communication is. It's just that opening to the oneness, to the bliss. Like you were in that place. So, okay. So I had a beautiful woman on the show called Frances Ray Key, who had this communication after her mother died. She's on a plane saying, "Where are you now, Mama?" And she started channeling through her, and she thought that the information she was receiving was initially just for herself and her family. But the communication kept happening for about 3 months, and she actually ended up writing 4 books in that 3-month period. But she said that in that 3-month period, she was in that same place that you were in when you were up in that universe, like flying, like that same place you were in when you were witnessing your grandpa, that same state. This unbelievably expanded, detached state while she was bringing through the books. And then when the books finished, she kind of fell back into her normal consciousness. Yeah, it was very interesting. The books are incredible. Yes, and Donnie says he can be that incredible too.
Well, I never lacked for self-confidence.
He'd like to write through you if you would allow it.
Wow. Well, that's interesting. I'll have to open up more my quiet side to listen.
Yeah.
And hear what
I
he has
would
to
just
say.
sit and remember that state. Just sit and remember what that felt like. Just go back to that memory and just sit and just fly and just go back there and fly around in that. Just be there. You know, even when you were telling me that, I just go there. I just like use your description of it just to go there. And you start to just feel expansive. It's like all your cells loosen up. And all the sort of stiff sore necks and everything, they all sort of start to melt away as we just start expanding. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
And that's
great place to be.
great place to be. And that's for anyone listening to this, anyone that wants to communicate with their spirit guides or their dead relatives. Use your imagination, use your feeling sense. Just expand into the infinite, into the bliss, into the joy, into the carefreeness, into the freedom.
Yeah, that's the trick, to bring it back into the life where we are. And, you know, I mean, I say to myself all the time about, you know, when my time comes, it's like, I hope I'm on a hiking trail and I just take the next step and then I'm back into infinity.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, you know, the hard part that, well, in reading a lot of books about different people and their NDE experiences and so on, you know, most people say they're afraid of the dying process. You know, it can be so rigorous if you've got some disease or something, but they're not afraid to be dead, to be on the other side. And that's so true, because being on the other side, even just the little bit that I experienced, is just, you know, it's wonderful. It'll be great to just step over the line into that.
Well, dying is easy. We do it every night. Every time we fall asleep, we die. You know, we reemerge. And the only difference between dying and not dying is in the morning we come back, and when we die, we don't. So the dying part is easy. I think that we have so many misconceptions about what it is to die, and we're so attached to this experience. We're attached to our loved ones. We're attached, and we have this delusion that there's separateness. Remember, you said that there is only oneness, whether you're here or there or both. There's only oneness, but we have this delusion that when someone dies, there's separateness, or when we die, we leave our family or our friends or our loved ones. And that's a lie. And that lie causes much of the suffering that we experience in this world. And a lot of people reach that point of creating so much suffering that it's easier to leave than it is to stay. And I see that with people dying all the time, whether they're old or whether they're sick or whether they're young. They create this suffering because in that suffering, the decision to leave that suffering is so much easier than it is to stay here in this physical world. And we don't have to do that. We just, because the delusion is that we leave, and we don't leave. We leave our body, but we don't leave our loved ones. In fact, we find out, as Dr. Leo Gallen said, one of the people who was on my show, you'd like that too, Paula, maybe have a listen to him. He had his son was mentally challenged, and he died at about 22, about 30 years ago. So he'd be in his 50s now, still alive. And he came to him after he died, and he started channeling information through him, and he wrote a book. Took him 30 years to publish the book, but because of his standing and his status, and he's a doctor and all that sort of thing, but he got it out there. But what he said was, you're already here, Dad. You know, you don't leave heaven. You're here. And we talk about your life on earth all the time, you and I together. There isn't here or there. There is just this oneness that you spoke about. There's oneness in time, oneness in connect. There's oneness in everything. But we live inside this illusion of separateness and time.
Yes.
So if we understood that oneness, I know Donnie, he's saying, I want to write this on, I want to write, he's saying he would like to expand on that and write this through you if you would let him. He has a lot to say about this. Yeah, he's saying he's got a lot to say about this. Then much of the suffering that we experience here on earth would be alleviated when we understand the oneness principle. The oneness principle, yeah. The love principle.
The oneness is everything.
The oneness is everything.
And, but, I understand it's difficult for people who haven't actually felt that. It's harder to get into the space of understanding it, I guess, the oneness aspect. I mean, having experienced it,
Well,
it
yeah.
was just so phenomenal.
Yeah.
It was, I know that feeling, but some people haven't experienced it. And surely there are methodologies for getting there, as you've pointed out.
We experience it every time we gaze at someone with love, when we gaze into the eyes of a baby, whether it's our baby or a friend's baby or a relative's baby, whether we pat the cat, pat the dog, when we fall in love. There's so many ways we can experience that here on earth. When you were talking about that love, when you were in the infinite.
Yes.
And then you said, I bet I was glowing, you said. And I immediately had this thought, like you're in love, when you remember when we fall in love, like,
Yeah.
I remember when I was young, I fell in love and somebody said, oh my God, you're glowing, because we're embodying that love. It's not the love from the other. It's that love from source that we're embodying, because we're having such a good time here on earth. We're saying, like, somebody loves me and I love somebody, that we're actually embodying that love of our source. And we glow. We glow. In fact, I had another woman on the show, Penny Wilson, who had a near-death experience sitting in a church. And she said, dancing with God. She was dancing with this being in the infinite. And she went to get milk after she woke up from this experience, because she woke up and everyone had left the church and the pastor sitting next to her going, are you okay? Because she'd left the body. And she went to get milk. She thought, I need to get some milk on the way home. And everyone in the shop was sort of looking at her like this. And she thought, what are they looking at? And then she was paying for the milk and the person said, did you know that you're glowing? And she goes, oh, thank you. She said, no. You're actually glowing. And she's like, are you crazy? Because she had been up there in the infinite and she was glowing with that glowing. Yeah. So
Yeah. Wow.
we can experience it in so many ways. We just have to evoke that love. We just have to remember the love that we are. Anyway, I've gone on far too long. Rabbiting on. Paula, thank you so much for being on the show. It's such a beautiful story, and I really look forward to see what else Donnie has to say through you.
Why, thank you. When I get that story out, I'll call you again. So who knows? Thank you so much for having me on your show. It's been great. So, yes, thank you.
Wasn't that fascinating, talking to Paula about her experience? So beautiful to hear that experience. And I hope you were connecting to your loved ones in spirit or guides in spirit during that thing. And now you know how easy it is. If you are having trouble, let me know. I can help you. I do this with my clients all the time. We do all sorts of things. We talk to our guides. We go to the Akashic, talk to our past lives and future lives, and all sorts of things we can do when we know we can, really. It's just a matter of knowing that we can rather than we can't, because we all can, all of us. No exceptions. The only difference between someone that does it and someone that doesn't is somebody knows that they can do it. And when you do know that you can do it, you activate what you need to be able to do it. You activate your intuitive sense. It's a knowing. We create our reality. We're creating our reality through everything. We're creating our reality, our intuitive reality, as well as our physical reality. We're creating all of it. The difference between I can't and I can is amazing. So yeah, if you need any help, let me know. I do this with my clients all the time, because I think the best guidance we can have is from the guidance within. Although I can give you that guidance, I want you to get connected to your own guidance and know that it's your guidance and not just your head talking or your logic or you trying to work it out. That you're actually tuning into your guidance, and you know you are, because it feels good when you get it. It's like these aha moments. You have these, that makes so much sense. Of course. You get this, of course. Why didn't I think about that before? When you receive this guidance, it's like this aha. You know it's guidance. When it's logic, it's like, that sounds like a good idea. Let me think about that. That's when your logic, that's your logic, trying to create something through your intellect rather than receiving that receiving it just goes, oh, it's like you just become illuminated. Thanks again for watching another show, Accentuating the Positive. And remember to like and subscribe and leave your comments and join us. Who's coming up next in the Inner Sanctum? We had, Mary. We had Mary on the show last week, of course, Mary Rodwell. And for those of you in Sydney, Mary's actually going to be doing something similar. We're going to put on an event here in Sydney on the 15th of September. She's going to talk about and show us and show you how to access your galactic connections and your spirit connections. It's a sort of similar frequency. So it's all really the same thing, whether you're talking to Jesus or some future you on another planet or your Arcturian family. You know, she's been doing this with thousands of people through hypnosis, but her and I have talked about this many times, that the whole hypnosis thing, you know, is long and it takes you deep, but you don't really need to do that anymore. You can access that by being fully awake and fully conscious and be in that same frequency as a theta brainwave, if you like. When you go into hypnosis, you come out of like a beta brainwave into an alpha brainwave, which is more relaxed, meditative. When you're retrieving memory, you're in an alpha brainwave into a theta brainwave. Some people even go, and there's different levels of theta as well, different levels of all the brainwave frequencies. But, you know, we've discussed with, I can't remember who we discussed it with, someone was on the show. We talked about how we can be in simultaneous brainwaves. Part of our brain can be in alpha and another in beta and another in theta and another in delta. And we can sort of jump between, like, we're incredible, multidimensional, infinite potential, incredible creative geniuses. And we just have to remember how we are, how to operate the frequency that we carry, how to be deliberate in all of this. So we're going to be doing that live in Sydney, if you're around in Sydney, on the 15th of September. And also we're going to be doing some of that online in the Inner Sanctum next month in July. No, we're in July, this month, July. So join us with Mary. And thanks again for watching. Remember to buy the book, Awakened by Death. More beautiful stories like Paula's in the book. You'll love it. Everyone loves it who reads the book. And I'll see you next time. Big love. Bye for now.